All right, let's dive right in. We're talking about a story today that is just so epic. It honestly feels like a Hollywood blockbuster. You've got judgment, this insane level of faith, and a promise that, well, it literally reshaped the entire world.
And this quote, wow, it just sets the stage perfectly, doesn't it? You get this picture of a world that has absolutely no idea what's coming, just completely oblivious to this massive storm waiting right over the horizon. It's like they'd totally forgotten how to even look up.
Okay, so to really get a grip on the flood, you first have to understand the world that, well, that basically called for it. We're not talking about a world of simple mistakes here. No, this was a place that was already drowning in its own bad choices, long before a single drop of rain ever fell. Yeah, the picture the source material paints is pretty grim. Think about it. Violence wasn't something hidden away in the shadows. It was out in the open, like a public spectacle. It was the dominant force. The entire fabric of their society was just woven with corruption and brutality. And I mean, just think about that imagery for a second. Greed worn like a crown. Vice wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was a source of pride. People were literally celebrating their own selfishness, you know? They were mocking the very idea of being humble or having any kind of restraint. And right here, this is the root of the whole problem. The spiritual foundation was just gone. It had crumbled. Society had basically convinced itself that the world was theirs and theirs alone. No thought of judgment, no thought of any higher power. But right in the middle of all that chaos, you've got this one guy who stood apart. Noah. And look, he wasn't perfect. Nobody is. But his defining characteristic, it was his relationship with God. And that one thing, that was what would ultimately save him and, change the entire course of human history. Can you even imagine hearing those words? Not in some weird dream, but as a direct world-ending command. A flood that's going to swallow the entire earth? I mean, the concept was so completely foreign, so final. It must have felt like lightning striking you right in the chest. So, that command, that divine order, it sets the stage perfectly for what comes next. Because you have to realize, to a world that couldn't see the storm brewing, an act of faith this radical, it looked exactly like complete and utter madness. So the instruction was, on one hand, super simple, but on the other, monumentally absurd. Build an ark. Not just a boat, mind you, but this massive vessel of salvation. Bigger than anything people had ever seen, and he was supposed to build it on dry land, miles and miles from any major body of water. Just wild. And this is where it gets really interesting, when you see the contrast here. On one side, you've got this relentless, loud chorus of people just mocking him. Has the sun cooked your brain? And on the other side, you have Noah's quiet, persistent, unwavering obedience. Hammer blow by hammer blow, one beam at a time, he's just building, going completely against the grain of his entire culture. And let's be clear, this was not a weekend project. The source material really emphasizes this. It took years. Can you imagine decades of backbreaking labor, of people laughing at you every single day, all while you're holding on to this one promise, even though the sky above you is just stubbornly, perfectly blue? I mean, that's a level of faith that is almost impossible to wrap your head around. And that's the real tragedy of the whole situation. The Ark wasn't just some personal project for Noah. It was a rescue mission. But the very people it was being built to save, they just stood by and laughed. They were completely convinced they didn't need rescuing at all. But then, everything changes. The story takes this incredibly dramatic turn. What was once just a whisper of a divine plan suddenly becomes a thundering reality. And all that noise, all that mockery, it's finally silenced by the sound of marching feet and beating wings. And you can just feel the awe in this question, right? Father, how is this happening? You can imagine one of his sons just standing there completely stunned. Because what they were witnessing, it was beyond any logical, natural explanation. It was literally a miracle in motion, a living, breathing parade of God's creation. And here's what that miracle looked like. An impossible parade. You've got lions just walking in peace, elephants shaking the earth as they go. The sky is filled with wings. And look at this, predators and prey walking side by side. It was like nature itself was bowing to its creator's command, as creatures from every corner of the earth just marched, 2 by 2, right toward the ark.
So just as that first raindrop starts to fall, the onlookers, now terrified, they finally turn to Noah. But his response? It's not "I told you so." It's not prideful at all. It's filled with deep sorrow and compassion. He says, "For years, the door was open, but you chose to stay outside. The choice had been theirs the entire time. That opportunity for salvation was right there in front of them for decades."
And wow, what a powerful final moment this is. The source makes it crystal clear. Noah didn't shut that door on the world. God did. That's it. The time for choosing was officially over, and the time for judgment had begun. Okay, so this brings us right to the climax of the story. This is the moment when all those warnings become a terrifying reality, and the world is changed forever by a cataclysm on a scale that's just unimaginable. For 40 straight days and nights, the destruction just kept escalating. You can see it here. It starts with rain on day 1. By day 10, rivers are bursting their banks. Fast forward to day 20, and entire cities are just vanishing beneath the waves. Until, by day 40, there's nothing left. Just an endless, churning sea. Inside the Ark, they had shelter. Outside, there was only chaos. And in this moment of, well, grim, poetic justice, the world that once mocked Noah was just washed away. All the things that defined it, the pride, the insults, the constant mockery, all of it gone, swallowed by the very flood they refused to believe was ever coming. So after months of being adrift on the water, you get this huge turning point. A dove comes back, and it's carrying a fresh olive leaf. And in that one tiny green symbol was the promise of a new world. You can just hear the relief in Noah's voice as he whispers, "Life. Life has begun again." And that brings us to the story's really beautiful resolution. Because this isn't just about survival, right? It's about a whole new beginning, a new covenant, and a legacy that honestly endures to this very day. So as Noah and his family step out onto this new earth, they get this incredible divine promise. Never again will I destroy the earth with a flood. And as a sign of that unbreakable covenant, the sky is filled with the very first rainbow. The imagery here is so powerful, you know? A bow is a weapon of war, but here it's turned upward, away from the earth, a beautiful symbol of lasting peace. And that's the powerful thought this story really leaves you with. To the rest of the world, Noah's faith just looked foolish, right? But that foolishness is what built an ark in the middle of a desert, an ark that ultimately weathered the greatest storm imaginable. So it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? Faith may look foolish, but what storms is it preparing you for?